Welcome to Managing Sexuality Intelligently with Stephen Ng, marriage and family therapist. My name is Jason.
And my name is Stephen Ng.
Great. And we're just two guys hanging out, having a conversation about sex and sexuality. And what I do is I present a topic to Steve, which I planned ahead of time, and we talk about that for an hour or so. So today's topic is the intentional debriefing.
Ooh.
So
not the intentional interview.
Not the intentional interview. The intentional debriefing. Is that how you call it? The intentional debriefing?
Yeah. After a critical incident, like a very disastrous failed romance.
Yeah. So the reason I am bringing this up is because one of my friends who was in a relationship that was both mentally or emotionally and physically abusive is now out of that relationship. And he told me this time it's for good because they broke up multiple times, and they broke up on New Year's, so less than a month ago. And he's already been on one date, and he said that the person he went on a date with is too nice, and he thinks that he needs someone a little crazy in his life. And I kind of gave him a little bit of advice, but I was like, well, this is a good time to talk about maybe what you should do once you get out of that relationship and how to do this intentional debriefing and get into the nuts and bolts of all that for people who've been in a similar situation or maybe one that's not as intense.
Oh, well, this is a great topic. And I'm not sure your friend is going to appreciate our talking about him, but thank God we haven't mentioned his name yet. That will be revealed before the end of the podcast.
Or he's going to feel like a star. He's going to be like, oh my God, I have a whole podcast dedicated to my situation.
Well, it's a common enough situation in that when we have a disastrous romance, whether it was sexual or not, when we fell in love, got our heart broken, and particularly something like a marriage where it's now relatively public, depending how public our lives were. But, we are part of the community, perhaps part of the school community, the church community, and so on. Oh, gosh. And then there were children. And, we've got all these people involved in this experience. And it's shameful, embarrassing, humiliating at different times. And what a surprise. People don't want to reflect on that a whole lot and really ponder that because it is so utterly painful. I mean,
And is that the main reason, the pain, why they don't do that?
Well, I think that's a really good question. I think there's a natural inclination to avoid painful things like, how like a football team that just had a disastrous game, how often do they really want to study those game tapes to, understand where they lost possession of the ball? And I think that's, and a critical incident, let's say with the police department where a civilian who didn't need to get shot, got shot and even killed, and to review all the evidence and to really look at that. It's not pleasant to study our personal failures. That just is not pleasant, but it is very professional and it's very intentional. It's very intelligent to do. And I think if I could throw out a carrot that would entice maybe some of the listeners to consider doing this, it's that as painful as it was, and I've had those painful experiences as well. As painful as it was, is there anything in you that ever wants to repeat that sort of pain? Well, of course not. Of course not. Well, if you don't want to repeat it, then we have to listen to the advice of George Santayana, the American philosopher, who said that those who remain ignorant of history are condemned to repeat it. And I think that applies to personal history. But I don't want to repeat this. Well, then what did you learn? Because the universe will repeat the lesson until it is learned.
Do you think that that's the truth? I mean,
which is why I said it.
But I mean, that is.
I just lie like shit on these things.
But it is like that really just hit me because it's like I think that is so true, and it's funny how that just works out that way. It's like the universe is going to repeat those lessons again and again and again, and sometimes it will pound you if you're not getting the lesson, it will just smash you sometimes.
Yeah, let's take something really stupid and primitive that I'm sure none of our intelligent listeners would ever do. But you pick your first wife because you're infatuated with her physical beauty, and you just are so happy that she's willing to marry
likes
you.
me.
Yeah, she likes and is willing to be seen with me in public. So we get married and come to find out, oh, it's a disastrous end. Well, if you don't do a debriefing on that, you would never be able to figure out what went wrong. And of course, this is going to help all the therapists in the world to make a good living, because if you're not figuring out what's going wrong, eventually you're going to end up in a therapist's office asking for help. But whether you get a therapist or not, you're not excused from doing the work. It's your life after all. And there's no therapist who, no matter how talented or how well paid, who can learn this for you. You have to learn the lessons for yourself. So you may need some help, and I'm on board with getting some therapy if that's what you need. But I think the big thing we need is to start off with the willingness to take a look at what went wrong, and also the additional element of time, because this is not a 1 month miracle plan. This doesn't take place over a limited number of weeks or months. It might take a year, it might take 5 years. But in the meantime, even if it took 5 years, even if it took 10 years, you still get to live your life. You still get to date. You still get to try new ideas. You still could even get married. So it's not like I'm saying you got to take this huge time out and not live your life. You just got to sit up on a mountain and meditate on what a failure you are, you stupid idiot, until you have some sort of insight. So that's not how it works. So the willingness and some time, and I think we could all figure this out. But the intentional interview is really hopefully the part of it that is about preventing such disasters. But you can't conduct an intentional interview for the sake of prevention if you haven't conducted a real critical incident debriefing following a breakup. And for those parents who are listening, this could start as early as in your children's life, as early as grade school, when they come home dejected because somebody they really liked didn't like them back, to just talk about that. And talk about, I would recommend not so much grilling them or giving them advice as much as telling them stories about your own experience. I think kids love when parents can share an experience like that. And you don't need to drone on and on like I do for an hour, but to just make it fairly painless and talk about the things you learned, and whatever the lesson was, whether it was simple or complicated, or whether it was superficial or profound, but whatever it was, to realize our children need to learn this skill. And reflecting on failure is essential to learning how to do better.
Well, I think that's a good little point, because it made me flash back to grade school and having girlfriends. And I remember I had one in 6th grade, which I won't name, but I was happy to be dating her. But then I just never talked to her or never really initiated in anything. And then I remember it was Christmas time and she gave me all these gifts, which were my friends stuff that he had, and he just gave it to her to give to me, because she was not but then I gave her some nice things that she liked, so then she stayed dating with me, and then she eventually broke it off. But I remember thinking, even back when I was a kid, I was well, yeah, I just didn't even I didn't even give her any attention or anything.
Even the word dating is so misapplied, right?
Well,
at that age, and I know young people do that. Even now they say, well, we're dating. Or we're seeing each other. That's the other code.
Or going out.
We're going out. And when they're not going out, they're not really seeing each other. They're just, they've confessed that they have a fondness for one another, and they get to enjoy that mutual appreciation until the breakup. And the breakup is she says, I can't keep seeing you,
Yeah.
even though she never was. And now she's seeing someone else in fifth grade. And so, but it's easy for me. I think it's easier for most of us grown-ups to laugh at this stuff. But for the kid going through it, it's incredibly painful. And to be able to remember to put yourself in their shoes back when you were young and to share your stories, because there aren't going to be a whole lot of people sharing stories with your children when they go through this.
Yeah. Well, I didn't even think that I told my parents. Like, I don't think they know my dating history in grade school.
Well, no.
But it would have been nice, like you say, to bring up these conversations about sex and sexuality and feelings, because then it would be kind of cool to maybe have been, I was dating this person. Oh, what happened? Oh, this. So I wasn't talking. Yeah, you probably got to talk to him a little more if you want to keep him around.
And, and not to be harsh on parents, but I want to be a little bit stern here. If you're waiting for your children to initiate these kinds of conversations, you're gonna die of old age before that happens.
Yeah.
So, just when in doubt, just go ahead and share a story. Initiate the conversations. They may just listen and not say anything and walk away, and you may not hear for years how much that meant to them when you did share. But count on it. Your kids are going to be falling in love and getting their heart broken, and just initiating the conversation conveys the message that it's okay. It's okay to go through that. It's okay to talk about it. It's okay, and you will survive. And this will not be a fatal wound to your heart. So when we're debriefing, as adults, though, I think it's more introspection than conversational, unless you're very fortunate. And it's funny, in the face of, what I observe, in the face of massive collective ignorance, you see the development of a lot of rules. And I've had men approach me, but what about the locker room rules? And I'm always puzzled by that. What rules? Well, you're not supposed to talk about your ex with your new girlfriend. And there are people who get very offended with that, who really take exception to that idea. But if you think about it, isn't it a pretty powerful move toward intimacy, or at least it can be? Because myself, if I were dating a woman and I really grew to like her, I would want to know more and more about her history. How is it that you're single, for example? I knew you were, we were still in high school, I would say, well, I knew you were involved with this guy over here for a while, but that didn't work out. What happened? I would want to know what happened, because I don't want to make the same mistakes he made.
Yeah.
I'd like to be successful this time. So if she tells me something, she's talking about her ex. And is that helpful? Well, it's what I asked for. And if she responds in kind and says, well, what about you? I know you were involved with so-and-so. How come that didn't work out? And I think that mutual sharing and give and take back and forth between teenagers, between older people who are adults, even looking at marriages that failed, I think it's all good, because it's if you truly like this person and you're looking not just for a girlfriend, but for the right girlfriend, not just for a boyfriend or a husband, but the right one this time, then these kinds of questions really produce more and more intimacy. But what they also produce is more insight in your own mind, because when anybody around us is honest, it causes me at least to reflect and to search through my memories. Have I ever had that experience? And almost invariably I have, because we're all far more alike than we are different. So, of all the people listening to this, how many have suffered a heartbreak? Well, yeah, all of them. And how many have shared with others? Maybe some. And how many haven't? Lots of others. Or some people have done both with varying degrees of success. But the critical incident debriefing, I think, is first of all an individual journey where I look in the mirror and I admit, as much as I'd like to blame the other person and as many faults as she might have had, I'm the one who picked her. It was not an arranged relationship. I picked her, and what was that all about? And then to take a look at what is it about me that would pick a person who would do those things? Like in the case of your friend, how on earth did he come to pick a partner who was engaged in an abusive relationship with him? And I'm not saying he was the abuser or she was the abuser. I'm guessing perhaps it was mutual combat.
It's mostly her.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I'd be very doubtful that he alone was receiving the emotional abuse. I'm sure there was some mutual yelling or put downs, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I don't know the exact details, but it was definitely, I mean, I think, yeah, I don't.
Yeah. And so you look at that, and, okay, no relationship I know of ever got better with the addition of a judicious amount of abuse. So that would be a major error. But before we even get there, how did I not find out that she was abusive? Well, usually it's because we failed to consider a character trait that is invisible unless you look for it. And the character trait is kindness. Is this person genuinely kind? Now, if she's sexually active with me, that seems like she's being kind because we're hugging and kissing and all of that stuff. But that's not really what we all mean by kind. What we mean by kind is it a part of her nature? And is it her nature to default to kindness when she sees someone in pain? And is it in his nature to default to kindness when he sees that she's in distress? Even the distress that says, oops, I think I made a mistake. I don't think we're supposed to be together. I would like that conversation to be a kind one rather than a, what the hell are you talking about? Yelling and screaming at each other. So so the real problem was me. I failed in making an informed choice. I thought I was doing that, but really, do I have any basis for that belief that I was making an informed choice? None of us who've made such awful choices could then go back and say, well, I did everything someone could, and unless we're going to open our minds to, well, what should I have been looking for? If I looked, but I didn't see these deal-breaking behaviors or deal-breaking traits, then I got to really look a little harder at myself. For example, asking yourself the question, is my lover, this candidate for a leading role in my life, is she really crazy about me? Is he really crazy about me? Because if a man is crazy about a woman, the way most women want, it means he can't keep his hands off her. When I've heard women say, oh, he was just such a gentleman the whole time we were courting, it was so amazing. And I said, and then you found out he was gay? Well, yeah, but he was really nice about it. It's like, okay, well, because nonverbal attempts to touch the other person are a way of asking for permission. It's ham-handed, it's awkward, it's you do get to say, if you're an adult person, I don't really want to do that right now, or I don't care to be touched that way, or whatever it is. And you get to stand up and you get to walk away and you get to slap somebody across the face if they keep pawing at you. But so many of us don't even know how to begin these conversations. And it's not all about sex. I mean, it could be all kinds of things, right? So in the critical incident debriefing, I look in the mirror, I take responsibility, I made bad choices. Then what kinds of things should I have found out about? And lastly, I think the question, we're going to have to review all of these, but lastly, the question is, well, who was it who decided to stay with her as long as I did? Oh yeah, that was on me too.
Yeah.
So even when there's like overwhelming, abundant evidence that this person is really ready, able, and willing to become abusive at the drop of a hat, why did I keep trying? Why did I stay? And that usually has to do with my irrational beliefs. Oh, well, she's just so hurting. I just need to love her more. Or I know that she hasn't really been loved before. I'll just love her more than she's ever been loved before. Or it was my fault because I really shouldn't have said what I said about her mother. and I can understand why she got upset, or she's having a hard time at work. All the attempts to minimize, deny, or blame something else other than holding the person responsible, the person who said the abusive things, the person who behaved abusively, that person and that person alone is responsible for his or her behavior. So that's really challenging, because I think men in particular are really bad at this. I mean, they suck at this.
Well, my friend says, he said one of his was, I need a little crazy in my life.
Oh, God.
So,
well, men are really particularly bad, I think, at this, first of all, because we subscribe to the notion that men are the abusers, women are the victims. And that's just sexist. That is not at all true. Women and men can both be abusive. Women and men can both be victims. Mm-hmm. So the whole point of the conversation I'm having, though, right now is, let's put an end to that. Mm-hmm. So, then this brings us to that fourth question. What would I do different? Mm-hmm. And in his case, though, I need a little bit crazy. It's a great line for a country song, isn't it? I mean, that's a fantastic line, especially after a couple of whiskeys or something. I can just hear somebody singing that song. But it's the thing about normal, and normal gets a really bad rap. First thing most people say, well, what's normal? Mm-hmm. I mean, for me, it's managing your life within normal parameters. It's not normal to stab yourself in the eye with a knife repeatedly. Mm-hmm. It's not normal to attempt suicide every other month. It's not normal. Healthy animals don't do things like that. So this behavior, asking, and for me, asking yourself, is it normal to want somebody who's a little bit crazy, or however he put that? I need a little crazy in my life. Mm-hmm. Is it normal? And what did he actually mean by that? When we talk about normal, I often have clients confront me and say, well, so who's to say what's normal? Well, within normal parameters means when I get into a committed, loving relationship, I will not be attacked. I need not be fearful for my life and my safety. And certainly I would want someone who's grounded to reality, that is life on life's terms. So if I'm with someone who's crazy, that usually means they have a disjointed relationship with reality. So I can say, even though I was 5 whole minutes late from getting home from work, that doesn't mean I had time to have an affair. Mm-hmm. But she might greet me at the door with the accusation that I had an affair.
Yeah.
And then is there any way to really defend yourself against that kind of crazy? I don't think so. And to take a look at what is it for your friend, but for all of us, what is it that I liked about the crazy that I was seeing? That's a really good question, because if she got crazy and then broke down in a puddle of tears and said, I'm sorry, and then we had amazing makeup sex, maybe what I'm conflating is the fact that she was really disconnected from reality, but I really like that sex.
I think that's exactly what it is. So,
oh, really?
I'm pretty sure. I mean, from talking with him when I was back home in Chicago over Christmas, it seems like that was the main glue of it all, the sex. And it's like people think that crazy sex, and it can happen, but I think you could get there if you have an intimate, safe relationship. You could pretend to be a crazy person if you.
Well, I've tried both ways, and what I found is women who are capable of loving behaviors and being kind are capable of having great sex. That women who are sober are capable of having great sex. Mm-hmm. So I don't need any crazy for me to have a great sex life, but it is, of course, subject to other variables. So when we talk about this critical incident debriefing, what are the obstacles for those men who, like me, are a little bit narcissistic and don't like the idea of meditating on our flaws? It's hard to get over that resistance, but it's so worth it, because again, the lesson is going to be repeated if I don't suss this out and figure out what happened and what went wrong. Where did I go wrong? It's the same way, I think, with every bit of that. And so for me, I think my own experience has taught me that all of my clients, all the friends I've ever met, all of us have patterns of behavior. To use a Yiddish word, a shtick, and we behave according to this pattern in terms of picking the kinds of partners we want. It's got its own little rhythm or patter to it, like telling a joke that you're really familiar with, and you wait for the punchline just the right number of nanoseconds before you deliver it, and it's so much funnier. Well, for me, it was, I really liked fixer-uppers. It's a common enough meme for men because men like being perceived as competent.
And this is a true story from how you were.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Gosh, yeah. You keep asking me if I'm telling the truth.
Well, I just thought
I'm not lying.
Are you lying?
For the love of God, man. Yeah, I'm crying on the inside while I'm laughing on the outside. But yeah, I think for me as a control freak and a recovering control freak now, but back then, to be perceived as competent was super important. In fact, the opposite was also true, that women who didn't need me, there's no way they could love me. It never occurred to me that a woman who didn't need me would be free to love me for my own sake, for the pleasure of my company, for just for my own sake. But I kept looking for fixer-uppers, and boy, did I find them. There's a lot of messed up people out there, and a lot of the women who are fixer-uppers are just incredibly beautiful. So it was like gift with purchase when you go to Macy's. It was fantastic. And I've seen a lot of guys do that. There are a lot of people who can't be with someone who doesn't use drugs the way they use drugs, and her being down to party or his being willing to party is that's like the welcome mat into the home of their new relationship. And for other people, it's still other things. It's like you must be going to the same church or having the same religious beliefs, as if that's what's going to make the relationship successful or not. These are all irrelevant variables. They really have nothing to do with genuine intimacy. And if you really were going to have for example, to have a truly intimate relationship, it would be the ability to safely share even our differences together. He has a penis, she has a vagina, but somehow they figure out how to make that work, even though they're so very different in that way. Yeah. And if he were a religious person and she were a non-believer, I think it could still work out very well, as long as, they were both willing to engage in an intimate relationship, making it safe for the other person, not being controlling and that sort of thing. So like I said, getting back to the narcissists who are somewhat like me, and I don't mean clinically narcissistic, but
you think you're still like that?
Oh no, gosh, no. No, because once you see it, like the saying goes, you can't unsee it. So it's not like, well, I saw it, but I just, for the rest of my life, I kept picking out fixer-uppers. No, I kept trying to find women who had goals, who were self-supporting and self-motivated, who really had a life worth sharing.
And that also just, the narcissism part of it all too kind of left because you saw the benefit of doing all that. Yeah.
The narcissistic part was that I just really needed to be liked in that way, that my image in her eyes was that of the infallible go-to guy who could solve everything. And instead to just be merely human, what a relaxed approach to relationships that is. To be human enough to be two humans together, and hopefully two of us with lives worth sharing. That was a delicious change for me. But that change, I'm going to caution everybody who's interested in this topic of bettering their life this way. Once you see and have the cognitive awareness of a self-defeating pattern of behavior when it comes to meeting partners and getting close, it takes a lot of repetition to start picking better partners, because you have to climb up the ladder to change from the ground floor, and the rungs of the ladder are very, very close together. So it takes forever, it seems like. I think I dated at least 10 women before I got one who was reasonably adult. And it was, it still wasn't like the right woman for me, but it was amazing. And I thought, wow, I didn't even know women came in this configuration. I thought they were all, needy fixer-uppers.
Do you think that's because of where you were at, like energetically? I don't say bringing it energetically, or like where you were, like.
You mean that I kept mixing fixer-uppers?
Well, you said it. Well, you had so many till you got to a normal one. Like,
I see what you're saying.
For me, I think like after my last relationship, it was kind of the opposite, where I was meeting a lot of women who were open, and I was having few of the ones that were closed off, but I was able to see that right away.
One of the things about me, though, I think is I was incredibly immature and unhelped. While you have been much more mature, and you've had me.
Yeah, you were younger too, like in your 20s, right?
Well, I was in my 20s. Yes, I was. But then when I divorced, I was in my late 30s.
Okay, so yeah.
And then when I started dating, I still was dating women who were fixer-uppers, but they were better in some ways.
Yeah.
It just took, when you have a new idea and you really want to run with it and you try your best, but it's a complicated sort of maneuver. Like even a guy or woman in a dojo learning a new move in Aikido or something, it takes a minute to perfect that new move.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same way with this complicated social move of dating and finding a partner. It takes a minute to start figuring this out. It sure took me time.
Well, it's funny for me. It was like while my relationship was disintegrating, that's when I was working with you. So it's like I got it just at the right time. So then when I was ready to date, I was primed, and my thinking of what I wanted, what I was looking for had evolved to fit more of this sort of stuff that we talk about here. And that allowed me to meet more better matches, I feel like.
And when you say better matches, your shtick before, what kind of women were you defaulting to?
I was doing all the stuff that you shouldn't do. Like if a woman comes up and talks to me, then that's going to be my girlfriend. I was doing,
oh man, we're so messed up.
I was doing, let me just date whoever's dating me. And if they want to sleep with me, then yes, I'm going to sleep with them. It's like, I would just not thinking, not conscious of it. And just, if I meet someone at a bar, it's like, yeah, that's completely fine. There's no questions about that. I was just not intentional, not conscious of it. I was just kind of going along and didn't even know how to really think about a relationship. And I had 3 of them and I just didn't even know. But then, cause during my breakup, I wrote a letter to my ex while we were still living together. And I told her all the stuff that I was learning from you. And I said, it's like, this is kind of what I'm learning, and I'm learning how to have a relationship and really being vulnerable with everything. And told her this is how we could do it. I'd like to start over, and that no abuse, like abuse-free life. Like, and we had it wasn't horrible. And she was just like, no, it's too late. It's been too much work already.
Well,
so I was like, so I kind of, I was getting the ideas, and then going forward in my dating life, I've been applying it, and I haven't always been successful with everything, but I've also, again, it's a process. But
could you agree, after all this work you put in, changing your approach and your beliefs, your behaviors, would you agree, and this is kind of a hard question, that you're a far better catch today than you were then?
Oh yeah, totally. 100%.
Because you're more emotionally available? Is that?
I was always emotionally available. I just don't think I knew like what intimacy was. I didn't think I knew how to build that. I didn't think I knew like about the creating a life worth living. I really got on board with, and because it's like, if I can't make myself happy, how can I make someone else happy? So giving myself the responsibility of being completely like the person who's running my life and gets to create the life that I want, and actually going on trips and traveling and building what I want, and just understanding. I've always been emotionally available, but also like, I don't know, I had depression and anxiety before that, and working through that sort of stuff. And
so Yeah, you've gotten on this program of self-care where you actually have a life worth living, and it's very enjoyable. And presumably for the right person, the right woman out there, she's going to find your life very attractive.
Yeah.
Yeah, and want to share. And hopefully you'll now remember, because you've done this debriefing, you'll remember, oh yeah, and she has to have one too.
Yeah. And that's my problem now. I'm the one who's picky, and I'm the one who's got to break the hearts.
Well, and isn't that though a win-win for everybody? Because even if you were willing to settle again for the first woman who was next willing to be with you or be seen with you in public, you would be unhappy.
Yeah.
And then she would be unhappy with your unhappiness, and she would sense that there's something missing, something wrong. And then you'd break up. And so it just repeats. And so your pickiness, it's not like you're necessarily breaking hearts out of cruelty. You're breaking hearts out of, I'm not the right guy for you.
Yeah. And I have to like tune into my intuition and like myself. And I also feel like, back to the debriefing, I'm still doing it. Like there's still stuff that's coming up. It's like, I've been doing the work. I've been journaling. Like I journal a lot about it. That helps me as far as like doing that. As
you should be doing a podcast or something. This is like, no, this is seriously, this is really good stuff, because I never journaled. But I really think writing promotes a really deep form of reflection, and to really be thinking about those things. And then you have a record too it's nice. Like 6 months later, you can go back to how you were thinking, like at the time of the breakup, for example, the crazy, either immature or uninformed things you were thinking. And I've changed so much. Look at me, so I think that's really great.
Yeah. And for me too, like I start seeing, like in the debriefing too, I think one of the parts is, it's the picker is huge. Like,
who you're picking.
Picked it. And then also seeing like, when did it go wrong? That's something you said, like going back to that first notice of, and I could recall a few of those, and with my last relationship, and rather than having the conversation, I would try to have it, and she was never comfortable with it. So for me, I was like, well, I don't want to push her and make her feel uncomfortable.
God, no. Who would want to do that?
Yeah. So then I just let it go, and then that was a complete disaster.
Right. I've had at least one former girlfriend say to me, I would never want to fight with you. And she didn't mean it because I was just so brilliant. She just meant that she was so in love, and she thought it was so wonderful, and that fighting by itself was bad. And I want to say something that I think is worth writing down. So if you have a pen at home, you might want to get it out. Conflict is an essential and inevitable part of every intimate relationship. And I mean that whether we're talking about friendships or intellectual relationships, like two professors or a professor and a student, it's really okay to have conflict. But conflict is not abuse. If you have the word conflict on a page, and then you do like a math problem and you subtract all the yelling, all the screaming, all the name calling, all the put downs, and if in a bad relationship, there'll be nothing left, because that's all that conflict was. But in going forward, if you're thinking, well, if I took all those things out of conflict, I would never be afraid of conflict again. So I'd be talking to my girlfriend and saying, look, I know you don't want to talk about this now, but I know we have some problems we need to work through. So when would be a good time for you? And so we're doing it by mutual consent. And then, and if she says never, well, then there you go.
That's your answer.
Yeah. We're never going to resolve the problems that are keeping us apart.
Yeah.
And if that's true, you get to look at her and say, well, that's just not going to work for me.
Yeah. Well, that's what I love. That's like one of my favorite things to say. Oh, it's not going to work for me. Because I think if you said that, she'd be like, whoa.
Right.
That's like, because instead you're just trying and then getting frustrated, but it's like, no, it's like, that's not acceptable. It's not going to work for me. And I appreciate, if you're not there, I need someone who's going to be able to go there with me. And that's how I want to have a relationship. Well,
and I think one part of the sell job on that idea of conflict is communicating that it would be abuse free, and that it's just, I want to figure this out with you. And I need a partner who's willing to help me figure out how we can both feel comfortable and safe under the same roof. And at any point, I mean, even if we're not living together at that point, if she can't do it when we're in a dating relationship, getting closer and closer and closer, maybe even having sex, well, when? When is that supposed to happen?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same, I think, the same process for women talking to men who are auditioning for a leading role in their life, to put his feet to the fire and say, hey, I've got some bones to pick with you. When is a good time for us to talk? And then if he says, well, now's fine, when you know that he's going for work in 5 minutes, then no, now is not fine.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we need some real time, at least, and you have to figure it out. Like, do you need at least an hour to present your case and to talk about things, to get some feedback? Or would you like to just introduce it in a half an hour? Or is it a small problem? Or is it a bigger problem? Mm-hmm. It's, and I will tell everybody listening to this, it may seem hard at first, but with practice, this just gets better and better and better. And my experience has been, my wife and I are now like black belts, 5th degree on fighting, and people don't even know we're fighting, because it's so quick, it's done and over with before anybody, because we've solved so many other problems. Mm-hmm. And now we work on them all, of course, one at a time, because I'm just a man. I can only handle one idea at a time. But truly resolving them is so helpful.
Yeah.
And then, going on with the critical incident debriefing and getting past my unwillingness, my narcissism, to taking a look at what was wrong with my picker, as you said, and then taking a look at why I stayed so long. Mm. Do you have any idea why you stayed as long as you did?
Because I was in love, Steve.
And those women who broke your heart are gloating hearing that. Uh-huh. For me, it's I think I just had an unwillingness to admit that I had failed. Mm-hmm. I think that was a huge part of it. Another part of it was I had this irrational belief, I just need to keep trying the exact same thing that hasn't worked the last 10,000 times. And because surely it's going to work one of these days.
Yeah, I'm sure that was playing in my head too.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I'm sure a lot of stuff, but love.
Because I was in love too.
I was blind. Well, yeah, I also thought that we had a really intimate relationship in a lot of ways. It wasn't perfect in every way, but we had a really peaceful, safe household. Like a lot of things, like I would tell her sometimes, I'm like, a lot of the core things that make a relationship great, we have. There's other things that are going on, but I don't think she was able to go to those levels in herself. And then I thought I was the problem and took all that on. And it's just...
You thought you were the problem because you were the one who was unhappy?
She wasn't happy.
Oh.
Yeah.
But
she told me I was the problem. So she told me, like, I don't know what love is. One time she told me...
Wow, ouch.
She said one time that I wasn't... When she was hanging out with my best friend of 20 years and his girlfriend, and they didn't want to hang out with me anymore, she's like, well, you're just not fun. So it's like I was getting pounded by the universe with like both fists into like dust, and there was other things. I like got completely obliterated by that relationship in a way that was so painful, but also probably one of the best things that ever happened to me, because it really woke me up.
Oh my God, that whole fun thing resonates with me, because I wasn't fun either, and for one of my significant relationships, and I haven't changed, mm-hmm. but my current partner of 29 and a half years thinks I'm incredibly fun and very interesting, and a real hoot, as they say out west. And I just, again, the right person for the right person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it was weird too, because we did have so much fun together. There was like, but then she like couldn't see it because she was wrapped up in other things, or that's what it seemed to be looking back on it.
Oh, it was fun, but just not enough fun.
Yeah, I don't know. It was, it was confusing. It was so not fun. I was just confused with it all. It's like she had one version of how things were going. I had another one, and I wasn't blind to the problems that were there, but that she was like completely negating the connection we had that was really fun and beautiful and safe and allowed for us to really develop something deeper. And I was kind of holding on to that when somebody just wasn't ready to even go there. I feel like that's what it kind of was, something like that.
Maybe she just needed a little crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. I think she did, because.
Have you thought of introducing her to your other friend who needs the crazy?
Yeah, that's good. She'll have to move to Illinois, but we'll be good. Get her out of here.
Or at least on the phone. I mean, maybe they could hook up. But for me, they're just, there are more elements than one could talk about in any 1 hour conversation that could have contributed to the misery of the relationship or the profound dissatisfaction in the relationship, including just, that she found me boring. Mm-hmm. And it never occurred to me to think, well, am I bored, or is being bored her problem, or what is she supposed to do about her boredom? Or if she wants to do other things, why can't she organize those things and ask me if I want to do those things, or go do them on her own? Because I repeatedly encouraged her to do things with friends, and she, so I just think it's a little bit complicated as we're getting through it. But with debriefing, you have more and more clarity, and you have responses to these conundrums that seem unsolvable at the time. Mm-hmm. But in hindsight, you realize, oh, yeah. And then this is where having a therapist, I think, can really be very helpful, because the therapist can bring up those questions. Well, and what did she do? Did she make suggestions about having fun? No, she never did. Yeah. Oh, okay. So whose job is that? And for me, I stayed because, yes, I was in love. I did have a hard time admitting failure. But then I also had that old saw of, but what about the children? Because I had children then, and I just, I bought into the whole broken home mythology. Yeah. And I think that is what it is. It is mythology. I think it is disappointing when it doesn't work out, but I think breaking up can be handled amicably and humanely. I think children could be treated gently and with dignity. And I think it doesn't have to be traumatic. But that breakup, when it does come, certainly can be dramatic, certainly can be an epic fail and publicly humiliating. And so I just want to encourage everybody who's gone through those things to bring it up, to talk about it, including even if you have a partner now, to be able to look at your partner and to say, this is one of the things I really appreciate about you, that, I can talk to you about these things, or whatever else it is, that we always seem to be able to have fun with each other. Or I like that you have fun on your own and you don't hold me accountable for being the home entertainment center. Mm-hmm. Whatever it is, because, and when your partner looks at you funny, and to say, well, it's just something I appreciate, because hasn't always been that way in my life. My other relationships, they weren't like that. Mm-hmm. And it means a lot to me. And then to keep bringing things up, even like, gosh, in the last 30 years, I've had to look at some ugly self-defeating patterns of behavior. I had this annoying defect. Oh my gosh. Still very controlling, in the sense that I didn't get abusive by yelling or calling names or putting her down. I would just, I had this very destructive, annoying habit of using a demeaning tone of voice that would say, in all but words, when will you stop being such an effing idiot? Yeah. And when it took me so long to break that habit. And that's, I guess, brings us to like that other thing where consciously I knew that was wrong. I was interested in changing it. I was beyond interested. I really hated that about myself. I didn't want to be that way, but it took some time. Yeah. And so that was one of the things I needed to change, because I'm sure that affected my relationships. And there were other things that I'm confident came out, but I'm not thinking about right now. I was always trying to help her become the woman I knew that she wanted to be, which coincidentally was this better, newer version that I wanted her to be, to go to school. I mean, even things that were relatively benign, if the other person doesn't want to do it, they don't want to do it.
know. Yeah.
And my job as a human being is to accept them for who they are, and then to ask myself that important question. So is this going to work for me?
Yeah.
And unfortunately I never got that far.
And I think that's really important too about the debriefing, that it's not only an examination of the relationship, it's an examination of yourself. And during that examination, some stuff comes up that you don't want to look at, yes, that you don't feel good. Like that happened to me the other day. I was like, because I said stuff is still rising. It's almost 2 years now since we were like not living together and all that. And stuff is still surfacing. And I think it's that I have that channel open to flow through me. But then, because I have to take responsibility for some stuff. And yeah, some stuff was coming up the other day and I was like,
well, you're being kind of vague. Is it like a character trait or is it a behavior? Like you pick your nose a lot?
No, there was like she had 2 cats and the one was like, had some health problems. And I was thinking like, wasn't helpful. I wasn't really as like there for her. I don't know if I should have contributed to the vet bill and she eventually had to like get rid of it. And I remember like not having like a talk about it with her, and like, I didn't like help her process it. And I just felt really kind of bad about it.
Like you could have been more sensitive.
I could have been more supportive. And I think I was more just relieved because we just had one cat and that was like enough. And the other, I don't know. I was just kind of thinking about it. And I mean, I'm sure it was probably a hard thing for her to go through. And
yeah. And I think disappointing for the interesting thing about the difference between us both is you're, in that way, at least, you're really a nicer person because that bothered you. And for me, I came down on the other side of the divide. Oh, I guess I hate cats. Yeah, I just hate cats. And I don't want to live with cats ever again. And so, and so, but it doesn't really matter what your truth is because whatever it is, that's what people are going to get.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's not like I want to torture cats. I just don't want to deal with them. And for a lot of women, like a huge number of women, that is a total deal breaker.
Yeah.
Because they love their kitty cats. And okay, I'm absolutely the wrong guy. I could see why you put a line through my name and throw me into the discard pile because I am the wrong guy for you. But, and it seems like a small petty thing to some people, but for other people, it's just huge. And I think I probably feel the same way. There's a woman in my local newspaper who writes to the editor regularly. And I'm not going to say her name, but I can remember it right now because I've seen her letters. And it's invariably about how she hates dogs. And she would be absolutely the wrong person for me. Yeah. If she were perfect in every way, but that one thing, then I would say, yeah, I'm not the right guy for you.
Yeah. Well, I learned how to like cats after that because I really formed a connection with this other one that stayed.
Oh,
so that was good. But yeah, it was still just, I don't know. It was just one of those things. Like I said, when you keep it open, I think stuff just comes and comes and comes for like years. I don't think the debriefing takes a month or 2 months. It's just, and maybe, I don't know how long it takes. Do you have a set time or?
I don't, because, my wife and I, we will invariably get into a really interesting discussion where we analyze our past marriages. And we had a somewhat parallel situation. And I love listening to her as she works through that and talks about it. And she as well responds the same way to me. And together we've grown wiser, more accepting, more loving. I don't like to be the guy who doesn't like cats, but I think the first step to change is to admit that. Yeah. And then to take a look at, well, what's that all about? Why don't I like cats? And is that something I want to change? And for the more complicated things, like in a personal relationship with an ex-spouse, it's, sometimes it's very humbling because it means, like you said, taking a look at some really unattractive aspect of yourself where you really weren't supportive and really, in summary, really weren't loving in that time in her life in that way. And it just wasn't on your radar. It wasn't like you you had the opportunity and you saw the need and you just said, nope, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
You just weren't picking up on it. And the same is true of me. I suspect it's true of virtually everyone out there, where we're not intending to be thoughtless or unkind or evil or anything like that. But in hindsight, that's how we came across.
Yeah.
And understandably so. And I get it. I do get it. I'm still a work in progress. Mm-hmm. It's not like I figured everything out.
Yeah. Well, if I had the tools that I had now back then, I could have handled that situation a lot differently. That's kind of how I see it now.
Well, I agree. But if you had the tools then that you had now, would you even have been with that partner?
No.
Yeah.
Well, so I wouldn't have moved in after like 4 months or whatever it was. That was, I don't know where it would have went, because there were things beyond the cat that were before that were causing me. Yeah. It was setting an alarm off that I knew it was going off, but I didn't know how to, deal with it.
Yeah, it's like me.
Turn it off. Or
I have all these appliances that beep or chirp around the house, and I look at my wife, what is that? And so I can imagine how it was for you, that just this sense something is out of not quite right, but not really knowing, or not as once you have the words, I've found that once I had the words to describe a thing, it was so much easier to communicate about that. And none of them were all that complicated. But again, it goes back to our lack of a class called Relationship 101, which I think should be in high school, where it's really about mate selection and managing intimate relationships, because all we get on sex is, insert tab A into slot B and stir vigorously for X number of minutes, and then
so it's a stirring motion. That's what you do.
Oh, you're not doing the stirring? That's yeah. I don't know how you're even having girlfriends then.
The debriefing is another thing to learn in that class, like this.
Yes. I mean,
intentional interview.
To take a look at the debriefing and to realize, because even if it was all the other person's fault, they were just an awful human being, I still have to take responsibility for picking them.
Yeah.
I still have to take responsibility for staying with them. And now, how am I going to make sure I don't do that again? Well, probably should stop picking women up in bars, and probably should take a look at my shtick. Maybe I break it up a little bit, start dating some adult women who are adult on the inside as well as the outside. Start looking for women who actually are compatible with me, like hanging out in the sorts of groups that are my tribe, so to speak, whether it's neurologically or in terms of my aesthetic or my interests in life. I so often when I'm talking to guys, like, where did you meet her? And it's almost always in a club.
Yeah.
It's almost always in a club.
That's where the ladies are at.
Yeah. And it's a terrible format for meeting anybody that you'd be really, it could happen, like you could roll the dice and end up with this amazing win, but very seldom do you get a royal flush on your first poker game, so if it seems to me that it's all part and parcel of developing a life worth living, which would also be a part of Relationship 101, because as I think it was Jung who said, no, it was Fritz Perls who said, if I can't live without her, then I can't live with her. And that really struck me as being a deep truth, because I realized that's the problem, is I'm just too needy. I'm too desperate. And it's not that I'm acting too desperate or too needy. It's that I am too needy. I am too desperate. And the remedy is right before me. All I got to do is figure out how to have a great life. Do what I want to do it more, do it with friends. And while I'm having a great life, I'm going to meet women who find the way I live my life attractive.
Yeah. It's literally that simple. Yeah. But it's also...
why don't they teach us?
Yeah. And I think with that, it's just trust the process, I would say, and of all of this stuff.
Right. Because even if it takes a year or 2 years or 5 years, 10 years before someone, that special someone comes along, I think that's okay because I've been living a great life.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not sitting there bored if you're living a great life.
Right.
You're too busy living a great life.
And it's not as though I'm not dating. I'd still be dating. I mean, because I'm going to be meeting women and telling them, yeah, and I'd really like to get to know you better. Can I buy you a cup of coffee? Can I take you out for dinner sometime? And then just to get to know people, I think that'd be a great way to live one's life.
Yeah.
Whether you're a man or a woman.
That's how I'm living now.
Oh, and you're happy.
Yeah, I really am. I feel more than ever. I feel more happy, more loving of myself probably than I've ever been, I think. And there's still things to work on always, but
no end to that.
Yeah. But I mean, at the same time, I'm developing practices that are healthy. I'm just growing in ways that I'm excited about, and I'm doing things that I'm passionate about. I mean, such as this. So I'm really happy to be doing things that are, for the majority of my life, I worked jobs I didn't care about. So it's
so
nice.
If you're a woman between the ages of 30 and 45 and you like the sound of Jason's voice, please feel free to drop him a line here at In Counseling.
Yeah. Hit me up, ladies. All right, cool. Well, let's wrap it up there. And to wrap things up, we have a listener question as always.
Okay.
So if you have a question for Steve, or if you are interested in dating me, visit stevening.com and fill out the contact form. This week's question is as follows. I've given up alcohol for 6 months now, and my wife is still drinking. I don't need her to stop drinking too, but it feels like we now have a disconnect. What do you suggest?
That's a really challenging one. Mm-hmm. So this man who has quit drinking, he doesn't need her to quit drinking too, but kind of like your words a few moments ago, he knows something's wrong, and he's called it a disconnect. Well, yeah, there's a disconnect when my spouse is intoxicated. They're not really with me. They might be in the same room with me, but they're not with me. They have altered their consciousness, which I'm not against. I think people get to alter their consciousness with the right chemicals, but to do that intentionally rather than just purely recreationally, to do it here and there in one's life or intentionally again, rather than just every night after work or, well, now we're home, so let's crack open a few beers and, oh, you're not drinking? I'll drink that one. There's no way to stay connected to somebody who's intoxicated on the regular. And so the challenge here is, I know that the person who wrote this in doesn't want to be a control freak. He doesn't want to start trying to control her drinking, and that would be a fool's errand anyway. There is no controlling that, but he could speak to her about his sense of disconnect. And I think the word really is loneliness. I think he feels lonely and when he gets disconnected. And I think that if he lets her know that he really wants more of her, and it's not that he's trying to control her, but he's really hoping that they can have more. And I wish him the very best, because I don't know if she's addicted to alcohol or not, or just very fond of it and feels threatened perhaps by the idea of giving it up. But, it's at some point, this could become a profoundly upsetting thing to the point of a deal breaker, where eventually one moves on, because the alternative is I'm going to stay with her even though I feel this profound disconnect. I feel lonely often. I feel disappointed, when she drinks. But then there's this other person that I'm meeting, or series of other people that I'm meeting who don't drink like that, who really seem to like me for my own sake and enjoy the pleasure of my company. And they don't need drugs and alcohol to enjoy me. They don't need drugs and alcohol because they have a life worth living and they really enjoy being alive. That's really setting a guy up for an affair. And the guy who lets himself persist in that relationship where he's so vulnerable, he's setting himself up to have an affair.
Well,
so talk to her.
Talk.
And then if you can't resolve it, you got to move on, Betty.
All right. Thank you all for listening. And thank you, Steve, as always. And we'll catch you at the next episode.
See you then.